Will the Dallas Cowboys play spoiler on Sunday Night Football, or will the Bucs take care of business? We'll break it down on this crossover edition of the Locked On Bucs and Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to this crossover edition of the Locked On Bucs and Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today is the host of Locked On Bucs. It's James Yarcho. You can follow him on Twitter at JYarcho_Bucs. And this is a big game for the Buccaneers here on Sunday Night Football. And I think that's the reason why, James, that they didn't flex this out is because Tampa Bay actually has something to play for. They are a game up in the NFC South over the Falcons. How are you feeling about this game and the Bucs going into week 16 now?
I feel justified, I guess, is a way of putting it. Yeah, I was on the squad. It was a month and a half ago or so. It was in the middle of Kirktober or Kirkvember or whatever Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons was calling it. And I flat out said the Bucs are making the playoffs. They're making the playoffs. They're probably still going to win the division. And my good friend David Harrison told me that I was insane. And he has never disagreed with me more. And here we are. I feel vindicated and excited that this is the Buccaneers team that we've seen coming out of the bye week. And, you know, Baker Mayfield, now NFC Offensive Player of the Week, absolutely destroyed the number one scoring defense in the NFL in their own house. So should be a fun game, should be an interesting game. I think probably a bigger reason that they didn't take this game out of Sunday Night Football is not the Buccaneers. It's the fact that the Cowboys, no matter how they are, still draw ratings, and they're going to keep them in primetime.
Yeah, that's a big part of it as well. We're going to talk a bunch about this game and the Bucs in general, but really quickly, I do want to ask your opinion on the Falcons going from Kirk Cousins to Michael Penix, because that is a big factor when it comes to the Bucs making the playoffs. Are you more nervous now that Penix is in the lineup, or are you like, hey, it's a rookie quarterback, he'll screw up at some point?
Probably more the latter. I think it's you know, it's a lot of pressure to put on Penix. I think there's more pressure on him now than there would have been if he was the starter at the beginning of the season, because the Falcons are facing a situation where they have to go 3-0, and you're turning to a guy that has never played in a true NFL game. You know, he's had a couple of snaps here and there, but you know, you're turning to a rookie now in 3 must-win situations and still hoping that you get some help. So I wasn't really surprised that they went to Penix, but at the same time, I was kind of taken aback. Like, okay, you're giving up on the guy that you just paid a ton of money to when you're still in a playoff hunt. So I wonder where Kirk is going to play next year.
Not going to be for the Falcons, I could say that much. Let's talk about the Bucs, because this Bucs team has been really fun to watch. I think there were a lot of people that assumed when Dave Canales left, who was the offensive coordinator last year, to go coach Carolina, that the offense would fall off. But that hasn't been the case. And Liam Coen, who has been awesome this year, has started to get some mentions, James, I'll tell you, on Locked On Cowboys as a potential head coaching candidate. Tell us about the job that you think Liam Coen has done this year.
He's been amazing. Like, there's no way around it. He is going to get head coaching buzz. I still believe if he's a head coach in 2025, it'll be for the team that he's currently coordinating. But you know, the Bucs and the Ravens are the only 2 teams in the NFL that are both top 5 in passing and rushing. And that's a huge difference from what we saw from the Bucs rushing attack last year. That was a team that barely averaged over 3.5 yards a carry in 2023. They're averaging over 5 yards a carry in 2024. So what he's been able to do with the run game speaks for itself. And then Baker coming off of a career year, you mentioned it, you know, a lot of people were saying, what's going to happen with Baker with Dave Canales leaving? Well, He's got 3 games left, and he's already set a career high in passing touchdowns. It'd be nice if the interceptions came down a little bit. He had a run. It still is in the middle of a run of turning the ball over every game, but he's been absolutely fantastic. It's been another career season for him. And to do that in spite of injuries to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Of course, they have Mike back, but Godwin lost for the season. And then you have a rookie wide receiver who's been in and out of the lineup because of injury issues, for himself. You have offensive linemen that have missed time. So they've gelled as a unit. It's been a blast to watch. There's one thing that Baker Mayfield is going to do. It is entertain the fans one way or another.
James, I want to ask you about 2 of their rookies this year. And let's start with Graham Barton. And the reason I'm asking you is because Locked On Cowboy listeners absolutely loved Graham Barton. And there was a section of Cowboy fans that did not want them to trade back from 24 to 30, just wanted them to take Graham Barton and be done with it. How has he performed in year 1?
He's been good. Had some rookie mistakes, as you would expect. Had a couple of holding penalties against the Chargers that negated big Baker Mayfield runs. But a lot of times when these quarterbacks take off, they leave their linemen kind of on an island, and the linemen are going to get flagged for holding. But overall, he's played really, really well. He's lived up to the billing. He's done exactly what we expected him to do, and he's only going to continue to get better. So, Bucs fans are certainly happy that he was the first round pick. They are definitely happy that it's Graham Barton instead of Jackson Powers Johnson, who a lot of Bucs fans wanted in the pre-draft process. But yeah, Graham Barton's been fantastic, and Cowboys fans, I don't know if they're going to be watching him play and going, "Oh, what could have been?" Well, but it's a name that'll be around for a while.
I will tell you, the Cowboys are very happy with Cooper Beebe, who they got in round 3. But the guy that they're going to be watching this game that they might really wish they had was Bucky Irving, who I host the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, a fantasy football podcast here in the Locked On Podcast Network. And I can tell you, we've had more people wondering about Bucky Irving's value than any other player in fantasy football. He's been awesome over the last 2 months. What have you seen from him?
He's electric. If you have to describe him in one word, it's electric. He's just under 150 yards away from a 1,000-yard rushing season in his rookie campaign. Yeah, he's by far the best rookie running back in the NFL. Of course, we don't know what Jonathan Brooks could have been had he been able to have a full offseason and then play the entire season. Obviously, he was the first one taken, but Bucky Irving is the guy that the first player to him is not the one that's going to bring him down. So be prepared to pull your hair out in that aspect. You could have him wrapped up, for a 3-yard loss, and he'll turn around and turn it into a 2-yard gain. There was one game, I can't remember which one it was. He had more rushing yards after contact than he had actual rushing yards in the game. So he's so much fun to watch, and he's good for 140 or 50-yard run per game. I'd love to see him finish those with a touchdown. He doesn't have that huge, long touchdown run this season. He usually ends up getting pulled down inside the 10-yard line. But Bucky Irving has the opportunity to be the first 1,000-yard rusher for the Bucs since Doug Martin, I believe. And he's going to get it. So the combination of him and Rachaad White has been really, really good because they are so different. But Bucky Irving he's one of the most fun players to watch.
And the last thing I had for you that I wanted to ask you about the Bucs is we're getting really close to playoff time. And I started to look at ranking the teams in the NFC, and it's the Lions and the Eagles. And then it's like, hey, can the Buccaneers be the 3rd team? And it's easy to dismiss them after, some of the losses midseason, the 2 losses against Atlanta. But then you go back and look at the schedule, and it's like, oh yeah, they beat Philadelphia and they beat Detroit. Do you view this team as a legit contender in the NFC?
That's really hard. And you go back to that Detroit game, the Bucs weren't at full strength. They didn't have Antoine Winfield Jr. They didn't have Kalijah Kancey, but they still managed to get the job done in Detroit. You look at the Philadelphia game, and while that was a dominant performance, the Eagles didn't have A.J. Brown or Devonta Smith in that game. So that one's a little harder to judge, but there's 2 things that every team that succeeds in the playoffs does. They can run the football, which the Bucs can do, but they have a good defense, which the Bucs do not. You can chalk that up to injuries. Antoine, Jordan Whitehead, Mike Edwards, KJ Britt. They have a long Servassier Dennis. They have all these guys that are hurt and missing time. I don't know if they have the horses to be able to stop Philadelphia in Philadelphia. I don't know if they can beat Detroit in Detroit a second time, but they're not a team that should be taken lightly. If they have to take on the Packers, if they have to take on the Vikings, those are teams that the Bucs can absolutely beat. And if you want to get into a shootout with the Buccaneers, that's probably not going to go very well for most teams in the NFL.
All right, let's turn things around and talk about the Dallas Cowboys, who don't really have a chance at the playoffs, but they've been playing really well over the last month. Let's talk about the biggest storylines for the Dallas Cowboys next. It's that time of the year. The college football playoffs are back. And with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever before, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you're going to absolutely love. TNT sports coverage of the college football playoffs begins on December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. Leading into our first matchup, it is the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Crimson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoffs presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. This episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Why don't you check out Hillsdale College, which is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, and the Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. When I'm in my truck, waiting in pickup line, sometimes I just like to pop it on for 20 minutes. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, and discussions, or just kick back and enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's absolutely no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Welcome back to this crossover edition of the Locked On Bucs and Locked On Cowboys podcast. And James, I guess we have to talk about these Cowboys who are 6-8 right now, but they have won 3 of their last 4 games. It should have been 4 in a row if it wasn't for a mistake on a punt block, which we're not going to talk about on Monday Night Football. But for the Cowboys, I think the biggest storyline in this game is they're playing for Mike McCarthy's job. There's been some whispers and rumblings over the last month that maybe Mike McCarthy will be back in 2025. And I think this is a big opportunity because they have Philadelphia and Washington the final 2 weeks of the season. If they lose the last 3 games of the year and they finish 6-11, I don't see McCarthy coming back. But on a primetime stage against the team that we think is going to the playoffs, if you could pull off a win with a backup quarterback, without Trayvon Diggs, without DeMarvion Overshown, without Zach Martin, the list goes on and on, I think that would go a long way to helping Mike McCarthy's case.
Yeah, well, and I guess from the outside looking in, it didn't seem like Mike McCarthy was going to return or should have returned for 2024. What is kind of the general feeling around the team right now, knowing that they could save Mike McCarthy's job, but is that something that these players really want to do? Like, obviously they want to go out and win games and there's pride involved, but are these a group of guys that want to play for McCarthy moving forward?
It's a really interesting question because I think you're right. Like, I think for most people, they wondered, why did Mike McCarthy come back after the horrible playoff loss where you were a 2 seed and you got blown out by the Packers at home? I think there was this belief of, hey, let's run things back one more year. Let's go all in. And then if it doesn't work, we'll move on in 2025 when his contract expires. But when the Cowboys front office didn't do anything this offseason, they didn't bring back anybody. They didn't sign Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb until the season basically started. I think there was this belief from the national media, hey, they're setting Mike McCarthy up to fail. And then once Dak got hurt in week 8, week 9, or whenever that was, it was like, okay, what is he supposed to do now? And with the team playing hard over the last couple of months, it does feel like there's been some positive momentum. And I guess, James, like that's the thing for me that I've been encouraged by over the last month is this team has played hard and they've been decimated by injuries on both sides of the ball. You can make a case that 9 of their top 10 players have been on the injured reserve list at some point this year. And yet they continue to battle and they continue to put up a good fight against some of these other teams. I would like to see them potentially go in a different direction after this year, but you have to tip your hat to McCarthy for at least getting these players to still believe in him.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And of course, who knows what kind of matchup we're talking about if Dak doesn't go down. This is a completely different conversation. I think both of these teams are probably playing for their postseason lives in this game. Whether or not Dallas would have been in the running for the division, we could debate that, but I think they'd be in line for a wild card spot. But obviously, people, when they hear the Cowboys, they think of CeeDee Lamb, they think of Micah Parsons, though, and obviously Dak Prescott. But you have some other guys that have stepped up. You got Rico Dowdle. You have some of these other contributors now. Who are some names that Bucs fans may not be familiar with on the defensive side that could cause Baker and Mike Evans and Bucky Irving some problems on Sunday night?
Yeah, so they've been hurt on defense with all these injuries, but there is one guy that has played outstanding over the last couple of weeks, and that is Osa Odigizua, a defensive tackle who is in a contract year that has been unbelievable at generating pressure. He's not the biggest. He's not the most athletic. He's about 285 pounds, but he is relentless, and he is really good when he's paired with Micah Parsons. Mike Zimmer, the Cowboys defensive coordinator, likes to put those two on the side of the field together, and they run a bunch of twists and stunts in different games against offensive linemen to try to confuse them. And it's the biggest reason why this defense, which was atrocious the first half of the year, has been really good over the last month. And it's why they created 4 turnovers against Carolina last week. Watch Micah Parsons, obviously number 11, but Osa Odigizua, number 97, is somebody that you need to keep an eye on.
I love Odigizua. I really do. And I remember talking about his brother years and years ago who went to the Giants. Owamabe Odigizua, I believe.
Didn't work. He's a much better player. But yeah, I think everybody like at draft Twitter loved Double O coming out of UCLA.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right. And then I do have to go back to the offensive side of the ball because it seemed like Dallas was really dragging their feet in giving Rico Dowdle a more heavy-handed opportunity until recently. What's been going on kind of with the running back room? Obviously, they brought back Zeke and they've had all these guys in and out of the lineup, but what is it about Rico Dowdle that seemed like there wasn't a lot of confidence in him up until the recent past?
How much time do we got? Because this could be a whole podcast. I don't think the coaching staff had any doubt ever about Rico Dowdle's ability. I think they've always thought he was the best running back on the team. I'm not so sure. Actually, I know the front office disagrees with that. There's a certain running back on the team that the front office wanted to see get extended work in the beginning of the year, and that just didn't work out. And it took until November 14th when Mike McCarthy stood in front of the Cowboys media and said, hey, we're going to ditch this running back committee nonsense. It doesn't work. And since that point, Rico Dowdle is second in the NFL in rushing yards. He's averaging over 5 yards per carry. He's number 1 in the NFL in success rate among running backs. He's been awesome. Now, he's not a big play running back. You don't have to worry about him ripping off 30, 40, 50-yard touchdown runs, but he is the guy that it's 1st and 10, he's going to get you 5 yards. Hey, it's 3rd and 2, he'll get you 4 yards. He's always going to keep you ahead of the chains. And with the Cowboys now just really leaning on him and giving him 20-plus carries every single week, shocker, they finally have a run game. And it's really cool to watch. This has been a really bleak season for the Cowboys in a number of ways. But at least Rico Dowdle, who has 100 rushing yards in each of the last 3 games, has been one of the few bright spots.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be fun to watch him, going up against this Bucs rushing defense, which hasn't been good, but they have improved greatly over the course of the last month and a half.
All right, let's talk about some keys to victory, what the Bucs and the Cowboys both need to do if they want to come out of this game with a victory. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. It's a crossover edition of the Locked On Bucs and Locked On Cowboys podcast. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. It is James Yarko from Locked On Bucs. James, let's talk about the Bucs first. What did they need to do on Sunday night to get a victory?
I would say, the keys in this one, keep running the football, bring the pressure like you did against Justin Herbert, and don't let the moment get too big. So let's start with running the football. Dallas allows 4.8 yards per carry this season, 4.5 yards per carry over the last 3 games. But at home, they're allowing over 5 yards per carry. The Buccaneers
is that bad?
Yeah, a little bit. It's not good. We'll say that. But the Bucs are second in the NFL at 5.2 yards per carry on the season, 5.9 in the last 3 games. And they've been better at running the ball on the road, averaging 5.7 a carry compared to 4.6 at home. So the key to all of this is give the ball to Bucky Irving and Rachaad White. That's what you need to do. And we've seen Baker make some mistakes. We've seen him throw some bad interceptions by making some bad decisions. We've seen him throw some interceptions that were just great defensive plays. You tip your cap, you keep it moving. But the Bucs tend to get a little heavier into the run game in the second half. They need to start heavier in the run game and immediately take the pressure off of Baker. Speaking of pressure, bring it against Cooper Rush. He's been sacked 11 times this season, 4 in the last 2 games, and he's being pressured on 16.5% of his dropbacks. That's going to lead to mistakes if the Bucs can generate the amount of pressure that they did on Justin Herbert. They snapped his interception streak when Jamel Dean plucked one out of there, but they were constantly all over him, whether it was Vita Vea or Kalijah Kancey. Levante David was making Justin Herbert's life miserable. That's the level of pressure that you have to bring, because while Rush has done a solid job of protecting the football when it's in the air, he's fumbled 9 times in the last 7 games. He's only had 1 game in the last 7 weeks where he didn't fumble at all. So if you get to him, there's a good chance you're going to get the football. And then finally, not letting the moment get too big. The Bucs are 0-5 in primetime games in the Baker Mayfield era. They lost to Philly and Buffalo last season. That Buffalo one I'm still bitter about, because there was a Hail Mary at the end where Chris Godwin was just, it should have been aggravated assault charges, but no pass interference was called anyway. And then this year they blew one to Atlanta. Then they lost to Baltimore in the same game where they lost Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And then they lose to Kansas City in overtime. So 0-5. Don't let primetime pressure get you. You have an opportunity to continue to control your own destiny, knock the Falcons' playoff hopes almost off of a cliff. You have to find a way to win in primetime.
And for the Cowboys, it's just don't beat yourself, right? You are clearly the underdogs in this game. Last time I checked with our friends at FanDuel, the Cowboys were 4-point home underdogs. You just don't have that talented of a roster compared to what the Bucs have right now. It happens. Like, injuries happen across the NFL. So don't beat yourself, right? Last week against Carolina, the Cowboys were really good in the red zone, but as they were trying to ice that game away, they run a read option. I don't know why you run a read option with Cooper Rush, but Cooper Rush pulls the ball. It gets stuck on Rico Dowdle's hip, and it's a fumble. Carolina recovers. They are not a talented enough team to make multiple mistakes like that and overcome it and win this game. So things are going to happen. Tampa Bay is going to make great plays in this one. You can't afford to give the ball away unnecessarily, right? And then on defense, your defense is going to make some plays. You've got to find a way to create strip sacks. Baker has been awesome this year, but he's had more turnover worthy plays maybe than what you would like to see. So if you get the opportunity to make one of those turnover worthy plays, make it. And that's going to have to be your offense. We know this Cowboys offense in most games struggles to go over 20 points. So if you can get turnovers on defense, if you can get shorter fields with your special teams, you're going to have to do it. And the third and final key is just keep it close, right? Keep this game close going into the fourth quarter because you never know what's going to happen. Again, Dallas has not a lot to play for, so they can play loose. But if Tampa Bay gets late into this game and it's in the fourth quarter and they're down by 4 and they've got to make a stop on the Cowboys, maybe that's when things start to get a little tight for them. So keep this game close as we get towards the end of regulation, and you'll just see what happens. I do think this is going to be a fun game. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored on both sides. I do think Tampa's going to win. But again, it's a Sunday night football game in Dallas. You never know, James. Never know.
Yeah, exactly. And the Bucs, they did well against the Cowboys up until Brady's final playoff game during the Brady era, but they've historically had, a lot of trouble with the Cowboys over the last 10, 15 years. Of course, different teams, it shakes out different ways. I remember when they flexed the Bucs and Cowboys into Sunday night football a few years back because the game had playoff implications for both. That was the birth of the Ezekiel Elliott into the Salvation Army bucket happen. But that was a really good game. So it could be an instant classic that no one's really expecting because these two teams always tend to play each other really, really tough under the spotlight. If you're a Bucs fan, you're just hoping that this primetime streak finally comes to an end because it seems like all the worst things that could possibly happen to the Buccaneers happen when it's primetime.
And I think Baker Mayfield has only played Dallas once in his career. I remember them playing in 2020. I believe Cleveland scored 49 points in that game as Baker went absolutely wild. He loves playing in Dallas. He loves playing at AT&T Stadium. So I expect him to be lights out in primetime. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making this crossover edition of the Locked On Bucs and Locked On Cowboys podcast your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. One in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. Go follow James on Twitter at J Yarko at _Bucks. I'm at Marcus _Mosier. Enjoy Sunday night football. We'll see you right back here on Friday.